Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider.
Hello and welcome back to Successful Minds. I'm your host, Patty Baranowski-Schneider. Today I'm joined by Cesar Espino. He's an influencer, #1 international bestseller book author, real estate investor, mind coach, and much more. He has lots going on, so I'll leave it to him to tell you more. So thank you for joining us, Cesar, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so excited to be here, Patricia. Thank you so much for having me. And as you mentioned, I'm doing a lot of different things, except I always go back to the beginning. And I one of the things that I realize now that who I am is who I was born at the beginning, right? And so my story really starts with that. I'm originally from Mexico, and I came here when I was 10. Except again, my story started when I was born. I was only born to one parent, and what I mean by that is that I've never met my biological father. To this day, I don't even know his name. I don't know nothing about the guy. As a matter of fact, my last names were taken from my mom's side, from her parents, and so I never really, had that fatherhood, if you may, growing up, right? And so I was born into a very poor society, in my opinion, with just my mom, my grandmother, my older brother. And we didn't really have a whole lot growing up. And as I mentioned, I got here when I was 10. And even between the time that I was born to the time of being 10, there were so many different things that I went through as a kid that for sure I wouldn't condemn anyone to go through, except that was my reality, right? And I think that's what kind of shaped me of who I am now.
Right. Yeah, I could totally relate, believe me. I always say that which doesn't break you makes you stronger, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess speaking on all that, can you take us back to your early years in Mexico City and share how the living conditions and the absence of your biological father shape your determination and work ethic?
Yeah, definitely. So again, for me, I still remember as if it was yesterday, and we were just, the four of us, and we were living in a very poor condition. I tell them, if you know a lot about Mexico, there's really social classifications. You really see the economic changes between families, right? And we're definitely the bottom of the bottom, right? We didn't have really anything. And I remember growing up in what I considered to be a home. Yet it wasn't really, it was just over 250 square feet of space, right? So that was our home, and it was not even our land, to be honest with you. We were renting this from somebody else, and there was no running water, no electricity. It was made out of plywood and sheet metal, and it was really right on top of dirt, except again, that was our home, and those were our living conditions, right? And I remember, really just not having a whole lot to do as we were growing up. And then when just after I turned 40 years, right? My mother, 3 months after I turned 4 years, my mom decided to take her own leap of faith. And she decided to leave Mexico to come to the States, leaving my older brother and myself behind with my grandmother. Now, as a kid, you don't recognize what's going on, and there's so many things that are going on. And I know for me, growing up, it's like, was it me? What happened? I don't have a father. Now my mom left me. And you start thinking all these things, like you start blaming yourself, right? And again, obviously now I know and recognize the sacrifice that she made, except again, she ended up leaving, right? And I had, for many years, I had that sense of abandonment, I've been abandoned to an extent. And so, and nevertheless, that created a turning point or a pivotal moment in my life, because as it is already, we were already poor, except this time we were actually forced to work. And so we were pretty much working. We used to go to the tianguis, or like a swap meet, and we used to sell cookies and taquitos and a bunch of other things just so that we can make some money. And, we were doing it for many years. One thing that I am very grateful is that my grandmother, she really supported education, and she wanted us to go to school. So we never were taken out of school. Nevertheless, we were really working really hard. So we would go to school, come out of school. I didn't have the ability to play with kids or do any of that stuff because I had to get back to work. I remember one occasion, or multiple occasions, but one specific occasion where I wanted to play with the kids in the neighborhood. And like in many Hispanic countries, soccer is a big sport.
Right.
And so a lot of the neighborhood kids were playing soccer, and I went out and played soccer with them. And after school, and I remember my grandmother came out with a belt and started, beating me and like, get back to work, kind of thing, right? And I'm like, I don't blame her. I mean, I get it now. We had to. We didn't have the luxury. There was times that we didn't really have anything to eat. I always say that we had the Mexican specialty dish, which is really a tortilla with a grain of salt, and that's all we had to eat from days in and days out. And so we were doing that for many years. And again, we didn't have any contact with mom. We had letters from my mom that she would send from the US,
Right.
but nothing, for her coming this way. And then we graduated from selling at the Swami because it wasn't going too good. So my grandmother decided to get 3 sewing machines, one sewing machine for herself, for my older brother, and for myself. And so we started sewing clothing for dolls, and that's working on that. And so to this point, if anybody needs any Halloween custom, I see it can sew. Nevertheless, I learned that from that, right? And so it was interesting because we had to like do as much clothing as we can. And I remember we were taking this like 50-gallon bags on the bus, like hour and a half from the house to be able to get paid. And luckily we never got robbed, everything went good, except again, we'll like try to make as many 50-gallon bags of clothing, take it to the factory, get paid, and come back and do it all over again, right?
Wow.
And so that was my life growing up. My mom came when I was 7. And at that time, she had the means to be able to come to the States and to Mexico legally. And she came, and interesting thing happened. And to this day, I still don't understand why. Nevertheless, my mom said, "Hey, guys or kids, we're gonna go to the U.S. For a vacation," and we did. We came to the U.S. for 2 months. We went to so I live in Los Angeles, SoCal. We went to Disneyland, to Magic Mountain, to all of these beautiful places, Universal Studios. And for one, I felt like, wow, like I have things that I never had. I had clothes now. I had shoes, like because I didn't have any of that stuff in Mexico. And then I feel like it's like a fairy tale. Just like that, it ended because after those 2 months, I'm here going to sleep, and the next morning I'm heading back to Mexico. And to this day, I realized like we went through all this trouble. And by the way, I'm being fully transparent. I didn't come here legally. We had to cross, like you see the movies, we had to actually cross illegally when I was 7. We were hiding from the chopper and all that stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, we went through all of that. We crossed the river. We went through all of that for 2 months, and now I'm going back.
Yeah.
I don't understand that concept. And I asked my mom many years later, and she said, I wanted you guys to finish elementary school in Mexico, so you guys can start fresh in the U.S. And to me, that doesn't make sense. Nevertheless, they all have their reasons, right? And so we went back, and now I'm going back to my normal life. And I'm like, okay, well, now I'm 7, and here we are again in this poverty and working and doing all these different things. And finally, my mom came back when I was 10, and she said, "We're going to the U.S." And at this time, I didn't believe her. I'm like, "And when are we coming back?" kind of thing, right? Except again, we did. This was the final time. This time was a little bit harder. It actually took us 2 weeks, about 2.5 weeks, for us to be able to cross the border and come to the States. And coming to the States this time, though, for me, I felt different. And why I felt different is, one, I didn't really know my mom. I mean, I hadn't seen her for 6-7 years. I mean, I don't really count those 2 months as anything, right? And I was really not living with her for 6-7 years, and I felt out of place. And the person that I see as my dad was my stepdad. They got together when she came to the States. I remember one time telling him, like, being very mean to him. I said, "You know what? I don't belong here. You're not my father. You cannot tell me what to do. Send me back, because I don't belong here." Because I felt like, I didn't speak the language. I didn't have friends. There were so many different cultures, so many different things. I didn't fit in, except again, I had a moment of reality, or an aha moment, that I think many times we go through that even now as adults. And for me is that I was comfortable being poor. I was comfortable working. I was comfortable not having clothing. I was comfortable not having money. I was uncomfortable Yeah, I was uncomfortable being in this great nation. I was uncomfortable with the opportunity that was in front of me. I was fearful of that. And a lot of times we let the being uncomfortable take away the opportunity that's in front of us. And I'm
Right.
glad that they didn't send me back, because if that was the case, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Except again, a lot of times we are faced with things that don't seem comfortable, or things that seem like there's so much fear that
Right.
we just allowed that to take away that opportunity. And um, so definitely, I ended up staying here. Within 2 years, I decided to just study, and I learned the language. I started connecting with people, and then I think by the time I was in middle school, I was like a straight A student. I was I had a speech for my graduation, so I was doing really good. And
Right.
then I had another lovely moment. I would call it another pivotal moment in my life. At age 15, I ended up the girlfriend that I was dating. I got her pregnant, and
It
and then I'm thinking
happens.
to myself, yeah, exactly, it happens. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh my god, I only been here 5 years, and I'm already doing this. I'm a kid having a kid, and so I had my daughter at the age of 16, and that shaped a whole new, area for me, where I still had to be dedicated, working really hard, going to school. I still wanted to stay plugged into school. I was very committed to school, and I also was committed to my daughter. And I remember when my daughter was born, I told my daughter's mom at that time, I said, I'm gonna make you a promise, and I'm gonna make sure that our daughter does not have to work the way I had to work, that she's gonna have everything that I didn't have, that she's gonna have to suffer the way I had to suffer. And
Right.
I had made that my promise. That became my motivation. That became my why at 16, to be able to continue to work hard and go through that. And then sure enough, I did. I graduated with honors from high school, even worked in really long hours, and kind of going through that. And then I kind of got into school, and kind of went to corporate America. So there's so many things there. But take you
I
back
know, I'm
a
like,
little
I
bit.
don't even know what else to ask now at this point. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely an amazing story. Um,
yeah, definitely. Thank you.
yeah, I mean, you kind of answered some of this, but I was going to ask you, when your mom moved to the United States, you had to start working at a really young age. So what kind of work did you do, and how did this experience mold your character? But you kind of answered that with the sewing and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess, what was the turning point that led you to pursue higher education and eventually earn your master's degree in business administration? And did you face any particular challenges along the way?
Yeah, I did. I would say again, I was committed. I wanted to really provide and give a future to my daughter.
Right.
The whole idea for me is, how can I make um, a better living condition for my daughter? I didn't want her to suffer, right? And so I think again, I'm gonna go back to the abandonment, right? I'm good. I didn't have a father figure growing up. My mom left me when we came to the States. My older brother, he's 2 years older than me, 2.5 years older than me. It was really only my older brother, my grandma, and myself. And after my mom left, it was like the three of us. And uh, 2 years into coming to the States, when I was 12, my grandmother decided to go back to Mexico. So now I felt like now she left me. Okay. Because again, I still didn't know my mom that well. Then
Right.
my older brother, he's very smart, and he got a scholarship, to a full-time scholarship, to go to no, to high school in Minnesota. Now I felt like he left me.
Oh,
So to me, I had all these abandonment issues for quite
right.
some time. And so, kind of growing up, and after I graduated from high school and all that stuff, I got myself into a couple of challenges, to where I was very angry, a very angry person. I ended up having a huge fight with my mother's mom, and that landed me in jail for a couple of days because of that, with physical violence,
Right.
domestic violence. And I remember my older brother telling me, "You think that all of this is because of the fact that you also had a kid, is because you didn't have a father figure?" And I still think about it. And it could be, cannot be, I don't know. At the end of the day, there was a lot of abandonment issues.
Right.
And so I think that was one of the turning points for me. That instance, that situation where I had a domestic violence with my daughter's mom. At that point, she actually left me, and I landed in jail for 5 days. 5 days, and then seeing my mom and everybody ashamed of me. I think that shaped definitely different things in myself.
Right.
Because again, I've always been very educated, except I had an anger problem. And so that definitely was a turning point. And I said, no, I just I gotta be better. I gotta do better. So I started focusing on school again. um, I decided to work on myself too, And then I started connecting with different people, and that's how I decided to go back to school. I started working at corporate America and different types of jobs. And then when I got my bachelor's degree, I decided to leave that so I can concentrate 100% on my work to kind of continue to move up the ladder. And then in my early 30s, I said, I want to go back and get my master's in business administration. And the idea for me is, I was in a different place. I wanted to be able to take all of that knowledge or everything that I'm learning, and everything that I've been working on, so that I can continue to improve upon positions in corporate America. And so I think that was the turning point that kind of led me to do that, long term.
It's kind of funny because some people, you're always told you should do this, you should do that, and just being told what to do. But sometimes you need, they always say everything happens for a reason. Sometimes you need that to give you the incentive, like your daughter. That was an incentive for you to do better than what you had. Maybe hitting that rock, that between that rock and a hard place was like, all right, I need to better myself. So it sucked that it happened, but in a way you took it instead of going downhill with it, you turned it around, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I think we all have, we all have a decision to make, right? And one of the things that I've learned now is that the choices and the decisions that we make today will determine the quality of life that we have tomorrow. And we got to be able to, and if we feel like we made a wrong decision, then we have to be able to pivot immediately and make a new decision. And so for me, obviously that decision, being angry, going through that fight, that had some major consequences for me. That not only did I lose, my daughter's mom at that time. Now my daughter was going to be going to live with her. That also, at that time, I was already, I want to say, a U.S. resident, and so that particular instance, because of that, took me 2 extra years than what it should have taken me to become a U.S. citizen, because there was so much, I have to prove many different things to the U.S. government that was not me anymore, right? And it took me 2 years because of that, and so there was a lot of different things. Yet I also realized that one thing that I've learned now too is that our past is just an educational experience, and we got to be able to extract those experiences so that we don't do them again. Or those things that serve us, we can do them better, right? And so definitely I wouldn't put myself in that situation again, because that didn't serve me then. Now I can learn from that, and we got to be able to see it from that perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And tell us, as someone who's had a variety of roles from corporate America to real estate investing, what drew you to real estate, and what advice would you give to someone looking to enter that field?
Yeah, for me, I've always got intrigued on doing something more, right? And again, I think I take it back to when I was a kid. Again, growing up and selling at the sew me, then sewing clothing and all that stuff. I think I had somewhat. I think the entrepreneurial journey per se, right? I remember when I was in high school, just to kind of make some money, I will go to Smart and Final. I don't know if they have it over there, but they have it here. So it's like a superstore, and I will get this bag of lollipops, an assortment, right? And I will take them to high school, and I will sell them for 25 cents, right? And so it's like just making money. And then when I finished high school and I went to get my associate's degree in computer networking, I started advertising my services and telling people, hey, I can fix your computer. Back then, I got very involved with computer, and I'm like, or I can build your computer. And so I started selling that service. I always did something, right? At one point, I had a company, a maintenance cleaning company that was cleaning businesses and things like that. And so I always had that idea. And I remember kind of getting into real estate back in 2005, 2006, where I started kind of building houses, right? And I ended up having multiple houses. And then in 2008 to 2009, when the housing market took a hit, well, I went with it and I lost all the houses, foreclosed on my properties and things like that. So again, another major lesson that went through. And so that at that time I said, this is not for me. I guess the entrepreneurial journey is not for me. Let me just focus on going to corporate America. And then that's when I went back to school to get my master's. Well, in 2013, I was watching, I used to watch HGTV, and I love their shows and things like that. And I saw one advertisement was like, hey, this company is going to be coming to Los Angeles, learn, some of the techniques. And and I said, you know what? Maybe it's a sign. I gotta go back to that. So I went to that show, to that 1 day, 2 hour event, and then from there I bought into 3 day event, and from there I bought into a mastermind. And I said, okay, I guess I'm already into this. Let me make it work because I already had invested so much in my real estate. And so I think it just kind of learned. It grew from that, from the idea of being able to, back in the day, always having something, right? So that's how I got involved with real estate, and I was doing real estate at the same time that I was still working my 9 to 5. My biggest thing is, and my advice to anyone that whether you're doing a 9 to 5 or not, or you want to venture into your own boss, my biggest advice, and I think it was Jim Rohn that said this, make sure that you're working harder on yourself than you do on somebody else, right? And so whatever that might be, whether it's real estate, whether it's writing books, whether it's starting up your own business, like whatever it is, make sure you're working harder on yourself than you do on anybody else. And I think that's the advice. It doesn't matter which direction you want to take. I really believe that that's exactly what you need to do, because oftentimes, even me being in corporate America and having a very successful job, I saw many people working there for 10, 15, 20 years that got laid off because now they have to bring new people into the mix, younger crowd, right?
Yeah.
And so it's never going to be promised. And yeah, maybe being an entrepreneur is also not promised, except you dictate how's your day going to shape, and you're working hard on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was, same thing, single mom of 2 kids, working 16, 18-hour days because I needed a paycheck, blah, blah, blah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of like I wasted I don't want to say wasted because I got a lot of experience, but it's true. When I see these people who, took a chance and they started something new and they're their own boss, and they, I'm like, wow, but I always had that fear of, so people should, focus. You should be number one in anything. And, a lot of people don't know that or don't realize it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is
So
that
now-
security?
Uh-huh.
Is that security? Is that fear, right?
Yeah. I was a single mom with 2 kids. I'm like, I need the job. I need the medical.
Right,
I'm so afraid. And a lot of people get caught up in that. But, if you would have taken the chance, what's the worst that would have happened? You get fired and get another job, but people, it's true. The fear dictates a lot of us. And
Yeah, for sure.
Now, your book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. It's incredibly inspiring. So can you share a key story from the book that you believe holds powerful lessons for our listeners?
Yeah, one of the things that I say at the beginning of the book, and actually there's also a lesson. Let me actually take you back a little bit. A lesson with that book, kind of going back to that fear, right? It was 2018, end of 2018. I had this idea. I was already going to a lot of self-development events. I was working on myself, just because after late 2017, I felt like I was going through another one of my dark moments, not because I was doing drugs or anything like that. I just felt like I was not in my true self. And I went through a lot of different ups and downs. And I won't say it was depression, but I was not on my best. And so I started working a lot on my inner self, going through a lot of self-development events. And at the end of 2018, I had this idea of, what if I write a book, which is You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. I said, what if I write a book about my story, about the things that I've gone through, pretty much what we just talked about here, right? Because I feel like the world, society, people, many in different aspects have said no to me, in many different ways, right? And I said, what if I write a story? And so I was inspired, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna write it. And something happened that I think happens to all of us in many different cases, and that is your self talk. You talk yourself out of it. You self-sabotage. And so the conversations that I was having, those internal conversations that I was having at that moment is, hey, Cesar, but who's going to read your book? You're not a writer. You don't like to read. No one's going to want to buy your book. Like, who cares? Why even bother? I was having those internal conversations, and I talked myself out of writing that book because of that. And I said, you know what? You're right. I'm not going to do it. And I rarely talk myself out of it. And so how many times has that not shown up in our lives, where we talk ourselves out of doing something that we feel we should do it, yet something comes in here, the fear, or you never done it, or the fact that you don't have the experience or the support, and then you decide not to do it. Well, that was me. And then it wasn't until like 2 months later, I had another conversation, and I started seeing things from a different perspective. A different lens. And I said, you know what? So what if nobody buys my book? So what if nobody reads it? What if I do it as a self-accomplishment for me, not for anybody else, just for me?
Right.
What if I do it so that when I leave this world, I can have something that I can leave behind to my daughter?
Yeah.
And so I changed the framing and the purpose of why I wanted to do it without caring about anybody else. And I'm proud that I did, because after that, it took me about 3 months or so to get my book, 5 months to get it launched. And oh my God, when I was getting the messages and reviews and people that I see at that time, they were like way higher than me, like doing a lot better than me. They were coming to me and saying, "Hey, I read your book and you inspire me and you've changed my life in seeing things different way." I was getting messages from people that I didn't know, like, "Hey, your friend gave me told me about your book and I got it and you inspire me." I got this one guy said, "I've been wanting to write a book on poetry for many years. And because of your book, I'm gonna do this now." And so one of the things that I talk about in my in the beginning of my book is, it's not my story that counts, except I want you to utilize my story as a vehicle or a pathway to help you reach your full potential, right? And so the book is really about from the moment that I was born to about the moment that I had some of my major breakthroughs and all the things that I had to do to really overcome all of the having a baby at 15, coming here illegally, being told that I was never going to be anybody, going to jail, like all these different things, like all those no's from society and people, how I overcame those. And I changed the dynamics in the way that I think, in the habits more than anything. Some of the habits that I had to do to really change the dynamics, from the things that I listen to, the things that I watch, the words that I use, all those different things, to be able to have a different lifestyle. And so I think the biggest thing is, Les Brown talks about this, and that's probably the message here too, is if you do what is easy, your life will be hard. If you do what is hard, your life will be easy. For me, it was easy a lot of times, working 12 hours and being tired, coming home, getting on the couch watching TV, or hey, let's go out and get some drinks, or to get some junk food, whatever. That was easy.
Yeah.
It was hard to say, no, I'm not going to do that because I got to work on my real estate business, or I got to work on myself, or I got to start reading, or I told myself that I'm going to start doing affirmations and I'm not going to watch TV. Like, so if you do what is easy, your life will be hard. If you do what is hard, your life will be easy.
Yeah. It's crazy too, because like I did something similar where I wrote a book about like all the hurdles and stuff, and it's not that you want to air out your dirty laundry, but it is true. You don't realize how many people maybe don't talk about their situation, but I guarantee you there's thousands of people, millions of people that have gone through a small portion of what you've gone through. And this helps them feel they're not alone, and it is true a lot of people think their life is so hard, but when they see what somebody else has gone through, that gives them a little reality check of, wow, if he pulled it off, I stand a chance. So it is good. And I appreciate how you're doing it for like a legacy for your daughter and all that. So I give you all the credit in the world for doing it. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Sure. Now, you've achieved the status of a #1 best-selling international seller on multiple books. So what's been your writing process like, and how do you decide on the topics and messages that you want to convey?
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to do, and I call it my highest intention now, right? I feel like I'm in my true purpose and in my true lane. And my highest intention is really three things. Number one is to be able to motivate. Number two is to be able to inspire. And number three is to be able to empower people, right? And with that in mind, I said, what else can I do that I can start writing different things to be able to do essentially those three different things, or to an extent, be able to have somebody take something away from any of the books that I do. My faith is that anyone that picks up any of my books, that whether it's a paragraph, a chapter, a sentence, or a phrase, that is going to resonate with them positively and impact their life positively, right? And so for me, I go based on that idea. And I started doing another kind of like an anthology book series, also called You Can Overcome Anything. It kind of came out of this, except with different subtitles, right? And the idea is exactly that. Part of this is that particular group of books. The idea of that is to be able to bring people from all walks of life that are going to share their stories now, very similar to what I went through, except now we're hearing from somebody in Australia, somebody from Mexico, somebody from Canada, and to hear their stories, their challenges, their struggles, and what they do to overcome that, right? And so we had different titles, from forgiveness to a definite purpose to clarity, different things that once you have that. The last one was with awareness. Once you're aware of something, right, and you realize that, how you overcame that. And so taking that, I wanted to say, okay, well, what are some topics, or what are some things that I know can definitely impact people and can definitely help them in something that they might be going through. And so taking that information, put it into a book, and now be able to offer this book all over the world. And to this point, we've been able to have the book series as a #1 in the US, Canada, Mexico, and Australia. And so for me, that's grateful to even know that somebody, on the other side of the country, or the world, is reading the book, right? I had people from India reading the book, and I never in my life thought that somebody would be reading something, that I wrote that's in the other side, right? And it's not about hundreds of people. To me, what matters is just one person that picked up that, and they may not know who I am, except there was something, they have that book, and there might be something that can help them. So to me, that's huge. It's brought a different joy for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you don't realize like what everybody goes through, and I always say, don't judge a book by its cover, because people just assume everybody's life is easy, or the only one who's having trouble. And it's like 90% of the world is all having difficulty, and maybe it's bad and this helps them, or maybe it's not as bad and this helps them. But at the end of the day, you weren't asking for anything. You're just telling your story, and if people could get something out of it that's beneficial, even better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now tell me, as an NLP practitioner and life coach, how do you help individuals overcome mental barriers, and what techniques do you find most effective?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing is, as you know, from the ages of 0 to 7, and I know that from an experience, right? What you learn and you go through between 0 and 7 is going to follow you through the end, unless you work on that. The reason why I got into NLP, again, as I had mentioned, I was very angry, and I wanted to understand why. Because my mom wasn't an angry person, my grandmother wasn't an angry person, or my brother. It was really me, right? and I wanted to understand why. And then I also had that going through my own training and working on myself. And that's one of the things that I did in NLP, to work on myself. That's when I realized that I was having this issue, even though consciously I didn't see it. Unconsciously, I was having this issue of abandonment, right? And it was brought up to me that, yeah, every time we're going into that inner child, we found that there was that idea of abandonment. And so some of the things that helped me when I was going through my own journey of healing, which I know has helped people that I work with now, is being able to tap into to your inner child, because a lot of things that happen between 0 and 7, again, if you don't work on those things, they're gonna follow you, even though you don't realize that. I didn't start working on myself until in my late 30s, and again, I realize it now. It's really that back then. And so for me, I like to also, one of the things that I do is I like to get a story, right? A history of you. And specifically the first 10 years of your life, right? And then once I understand that, then I want to go even deeper into that story. If there was parents that left, or they got divorced, or they grew up in an abusive relationship, like, try to understand that a lot more deeper, because there's a lot of feelings and emotions that are tied into that. And so then once we can understand that, then we can start working on those different emotions, so that we can start rewriting the pathways in your brain, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. I mean, you don't realize, like, it's just a little crazy, but how much everything comes back down to when we were kids. And it's things that you don't really, and when you're a kid, you don't remember everything, but it's in there. So yeah, uncovering it all is key to a lot of stuff. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and again, it's like, it's like this one thing that I tell people, like, you have the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, right? The conscious mind is the way we're communicating right now, is the logical side of things. The unconscious mind is nearly like a computer. So whatever you put in, is gonna spit out whatever you put in is going to also stay there as a storage, right? And so if you look at your computer right now, you might have many files from like, I mean, I know I have many files from like 5, 6, 7, 10 years that I haven't even opened yet. They're still on your computer, right? And until you don't either delete them or do something with them, they're sitting there in the back of your computer. It's the same thing for us as human beings. We're storing all this information that perhaps right now logically we're not utilizing. It's still there though, so you gotta be able to reprogram that. And so it's just like a computer.
Good stuff. Now, your journey's been on resilience and overcoming odds. So how do you instill these values in the programs you offer, and what success stories can you share?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is you want to become so there's nobody you're going to compete, right? A lot of people say, well, we started the same journey with this person, and that person now it's ahead of me by 10 times or whatever that might be. And one of the things that I tell people is never compare yourself to anybody. If anything, look at yourself in the mirror and compare yourself to yourself. And the idea is you want to be able to get 1% better. And that's the true competition. Are you becoming 1% better than who you were yesterday? And when you are able to recognize that and realize that is your journey, then you're going to have a much more successful outcome. The things that I tell people, in my opinion, is think of you want to go to the gym, right? And you want to have this nice fit body. You want to be fit. Well, you have to watch what you're eating. You need to kind of exercise and watch, all of your intakes and things like that. And I said, for you as the body, is the same thing. You have to watch what you're watching, what you're listening to, and what kind of programs are you putting into your mind. And so what I would tell people and anyone that I work with is it starts, in my opinion, first with your mind, right? That thing that's between your 2 ears. And definitely you want to make sure that you do a couple of things. Number one, the way you communicate. And we communicate in 3 different ways. We communicate with our words, the words that we use. That's about 7% of our total communication. We communicate with tonality, and we communicate with our physiology, right? And because our words are 7% of our total communication, we have to be a lot more careful on the words that we use, how we communicate with other people, and most importantly, how we communicate to ourselves, right? Oftentimes we're doing something and we realize like, oh man, I'm dumb. I messed this up, right? Right away, you're already telling yourself you're dumb unconsciously without even realizing, and you're programming yourself in such a way. So when you do that, you want to be able to immediately go back to say, nope, cancel that. I didn't mean that. I forgot, or do something different, right? Change the wording. And I did an article recently about why words do matter, and some of the words that you want to be able to get rid of your vocabulary that really are not serving you, right? And so I am more intentional now than before in terms of the words that I use, because I understand the power of that. The second thing that I would do is, if you want to start your day in a happy place and really get your day going, one of the things that I do myself is, one, I get up and I do affirmations. Every day I do some affirmations, work on those affirmations at least 10-15 minutes as soon as I get up. I don't really look at my phone. The first 10 to 15 minutes from the time that you wake up are the most critical minutes of your day. Then after that, I go out for a walk. I like to go out into nature, go out for a walk. But I would, whatever you can, if you want to do some exercise or if you want to do some meditation, whatever works for you, except do some sort of movement or something that is going to center you in your life. And then that I'm old fashioned. I have a notepad here. I write things that I need to get done for the day. And then I actually do a little square. Once I'm done, I check them off, right? So that I feel accomplished. I want to make sure that I feel accomplished. And then when I go to sleep, I do 3 things. Number one, I drink some water. Number 2, I do more affirmations. And number 3, when I go to sleep, I actually put on my phone like I am affirmations, and I go to sleep to those things because I want my mind to be constantly programmed at night. And so those are the things that I try to do, and that's what I advise people in terms of best techniques or things that you can do to start shaping things around for yourself.
And it is true about changing your mindset, because I always say, like, I live in New York, so I don't have like the country and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I belong to various groups on social media where it's like photography groups. So I see the sunrises, sunsets, the oceans, this beautiful nature, animals and all that. And it's the first thing I do when I wake up, and the last thing I do before I go to bed. And you can always find something positive. You could say, "Oh my God, the day's horrible. It rained all day, but look at the flowers that are going to bloom." Because you can look for the happiness in it or the good stuff, but it takes a while, because I know some people who are just negative, negative, negative. I mean, their life
Yeah,
is just nothing is positive whatsoever. And it's like only you have the power to change that.
yeah,
You can have the worst life ever, but there's
right.
something positive in there. You can have horrible life, but look at the person who's homeless living in the street when it's minus 20 degrees. It's
Yeah,
not that
exactly.
bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
so good stuff.
No, yeah, one of the things that just came to mind about the mind too, right? Um, and this happens to many people, right? When I like scary movies too, and
Yeah,
and all that. Except here's a good point. A lot of people say, "Well, I had a nightmare last night," and sometimes they have a nightmare because the last thing they watched was a scary movie. Again, so what you program yourself is what you're gonna end up having throughout the night.
yeah,
And and the last thing I will say to that is there's an African proverb that says, when there's no enemy within, there's no enemy outside that can do you no harm. So the minute that you start working on yourself, your inner self, your thoughts, there's nothing else outside that can harm you, right?
right,
And so I believe the mind can make you or break you. And the biggest thing, it came to us for free. There's no extra cost. You got it for free when you were born, except it's way underutilized.
right. Good stuff. Now, I guess, can you tell us about the self-development events that you host? Like, what can participants expect, and how do these events impact their personal and professional lives?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I got involved with them again. I think primarily the self development in 2017, and now I am I've been so involved with a particular group, and I do different ones, but this one is the one that I do is my primary one,
Mhm.
and it's a 2.5 day event, and I'm now grateful to be one of the coaches. So I'm there to help support people look at your long term goals. We look at what are the things that you're trying to accomplish in the next 6 to 12 months. What might be holding you back? What are the thoughts that are going through your head, right? And so this particular event, I would say there's several things going to be learning. Number one, the the influence and the power of the mind. Why, again, words are so critical, the things you got to do to really reprogram the unconscious mind to get better results. We also talk about sales techniques, and how to be more influential so that you can get people that either you're doing business with, or even just friends or things like that, that they see you on a different perspective. You're more influential. We're always selling, whether it's to your kids, to your husband, wife. You're always selling an idea, right? And so how can you become more influential in that sense? And then we also talk about the velocity of money, how money has to move hands from one to another for your economy to grow and everybody else's economy to grow. And then we talk about relationships, building relationships not only with business partners, also loving relationships, and how to foster those relationships, right? And then one of the biggest things that we do there, we do a couple of mind exercises, or I call them mind triggers, right? Physical exercises where when you go through that exercise, you're probably telling yourself like, I'm not able to do this. This is too hard, right? Except when you do it, and even though you do it with fear and you actually went through it, you realize, wow, I didn't think I could do this, except I did it. And so I always ask people, when else is that showing up in your life? Where else does that show up in your life? Where you think something's so difficult that you cannot do, yet you're able to do it. And one of the exercises is people being able to eat fire, right? So they actually take a torch, and we light it up and they eat fire.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have that fear of putting that in their mouth with
Right.
with fuel and fire. And again, once you go through that and you realize that you actually were able to do it, it's like, man, what else am I telling myself that I
Mhm.
can't do when I know
Mhm.
I can do it, even if I'm fearful, right? And so those are some of the things that people can have. We had some major breakthroughs, and people come out with many pages of notes and say, hey, this has changed my way of thinking, my way of doing. It's funny, there was a lady that I met at the event, probably maybe about 6 7 months now. No, it's probably going to be more like 10 months. And she came the first time, and she was a little bit overweight, except again, she didn't realize that she was unconsciously programming herself, by calling herself fat. Like, she was making fat jokes so that her family wouldn't make the jokes, and she wouldn't feel that bad. So she would be the person like, oh yeah, I'm fat or whatever this might be, right? So that again, she triggered that, and nobody will make more fun of her, except she was unconsciously programming herself. And when she came to the event, and then she realized that words do matter, and she changed that. Part of that helped her lose a lot of weight, because now she starts seeing things from a different perspective, and she lost like 40 pounds. And so she was actually in one of my books, and talks about that same story on how that really shaped herself. So yeah, many people have many different breakthroughs. I think people come for different reasons, and because it's not necessarily tailored to a particular business or industry, whether it's real estate or insurance or whatever that might be. It is really tailored to just mindset growth, business growth in general. So a lot of people have different breakthroughs for sure.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of times you need that outside person to see things, because we don't see it ourselves. But you can have an outside person who just having a casual conversation could be like, I don't know if you were aware, but you keep saying this, or you're doing this, or did you realize that your emotions are this? They're like, wow, no, I didn't, and kind of take it from there. So that's good that people are actually looking for the help, because so many people, don't, and they're suffering because of it, but they have to know that there's help out there. And like you said, look at what I've overcome. If I could do it, you could do it too.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So now tell us, as a father and grandfather, what legacy do you want to leave for your family, and how do you plan on achieving it?
I would say, for me, I want my daughter and my grandkid to be able to see, like, I was a fighter. Like, I never gave up, and I always persisted on becoming bigger and better, right? And if anything, I want to be able to leave that behind. More than anything, all the teachings, and I think part of the journey that I'm doing now, and the fact that where I came from and where I am now, and everything that I've done, putting that together and being able to leave that for them. I think the best thing that I can leave them behind is not any amount of money, because I don't think that's the answer. I think is the amount of effort and the amount of knowledge that I can give them, and hence why I wanted to write that book, right? And so for me, being able to leave that behind and be an example to them, like, this is what my dad did or my grandfather did, and therefore I want to follow that. And I think to this point, I'm doing a good job on that. I'm very proud of my daughter. She's definitely doing good for herself. And how I want to accomplish that is by staying truthful and authentic to myself, and always being honest, and always being able to show her, who I'm truly are. So if I'm going through a down moment, I want her to be able to see that, not be able to lie to her, and be able for her to recognize that we all go through those, it's a roller coaster, right? And so I want to be able to just be truthful and authentic, and always be there for her, regardless of whatever might be going on in her life.
Nice. Wow, you have an amazing story. It's so much going on. But that's awesome. It's good that you don't hide your past, because it's, I did that for the longest time. Like I said, people judged a book by its cover, and they said, oh, she's got it all. Life is handed to her on a silver platter. It's like, you have no idea. And it helps people to, one, look up to you now, because they don't, if they just thought you had life handed to you, and they realized how hard you worked to get to where you are, that's awesome. But the biggest picture is that you realize so many other people are going through similar stuff, and it makes them feel not alone. And then you kind of lean on each other. And, I think nowadays, in today's world, people being a lot more open and honest about things, it's starting to, make a lot of people feel that, okay, I'm not alone in this, so other people have gone through this too, and they can learn from you, And education, number one, I get it.
No, definitely. And one of the things that I would say, whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're going to, I'm not knocking traditional education, because I have a master's. I might see it a little bit different, just because of the journey that I've taken now. The biggest thing, though, is you want to educate yourself, whether it's through traditional education or non-traditional, which what I consider to be non-traditional, books, mentors, events, all of that. That's non-traditional. Like, always learning, keep learning. I believe that the minute that you stop learning, you start dying, right? Because you feel like there's no sense of life in terms of that. So always educate yourself as much as you can. Read, listen to podcasts like this. Like, you're always gonna find something that can help you become better.
The mind is a muscle, use it or lose it, you know.
Exactly.
I mean, I've seen that with like my grandparents, you know, dementia. The minute they stopped doing crossword puzzles or just stopped, you know, keeping their minds going, it just went downhill from there. So people listen.
Yes, definitely.
Nice. So tell us, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the best way that you can get a hold of me, you can go to my website, www.cesarrespino.com. And then that's probably one of the best ways. Actually, in every social media, Cesar R. Espino, or just Google my name, Cesar R. Espino, and you can find me there.
Okay, I'm going to include it on here too, but cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks again for being on the show. Again, that was Cesar Espino. So thanks for listening to Successful Minds with Patty B. Never miss an episode by subscribing. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Successful Minds with your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.